Welcome to the Comic Book Diner, a weekly review of the changing comics art form from print to web, newspapers to iPads, comic shops to digital download. Each week, we'll be talking about the creation, business, fun, and heartaches that every cartoonist, young and old, needs to know. Yes, we'll visit from time to time, and Jamar and Rich here will offer deep insights while I, John Gallagher, heartily promote my own agenda of truth, justice, and all you can eat at the Comic Book Diner. Just going around the table, I'm John Gallagher, who writes and draws Buzzboy, buzzboy.com and skydogcomics.com. To my virtual left is Jamar Nicholas.
Hi, I'm Jamar Nicholas. I'm black. I also...
Playing that card already, are we?
I'm also in charge of the infamous web site called jamarnicholas.com, where you can find my ramblings, musings, and witticisms that are posted occasionally, not daily anymore. I'm also known for the webcomic Detective Boogaloo Hip Hop Cop and an upcoming Beacon Press and Random House book called Fist Stick Knife Gun. Thanks for having me.
And Rich Faber.
Hi, I'm Rich Faber. As John said, I'm nowhere near as funny or witty as Jamar.
Or as black.
Or as black.
Or as black, that's true, although probably more than John.
That is.
And, which is true. And my website is richfaber.com, and I am also affiliated with Skydog Comics as the editor and finishing artist on Buzzboy, as well as one of the co-creators along with John on Roboy Red, which is also at roboyred.com. I guess we can get started with stuff, John, if you want to take things
Exactly.
back.
Well, Jamar, apparently you had a pretty interesting time this week up in New York City, and this was, I think, in regards to your new book that's going to be coming out.
That's correct. Well, I don't want to take over the hour because I've been known to talk.
Well, we don't want you to take a whole hour. Just 10 minutes would be great.
Okay. This book project that I'm in the middle of, like I talked about at the beginning of the hour, Fist Stick Knife Gun is an adaptation from the Harlem Children's Zone CEO Jeffrey Canada, who you may see on television and everywhere else these days. He's a pretty big deal. Wrote his memoirs 15 years ago, and his publisher Beacon Press asked me if I would be interested in updating that and adapting it into a graphic novel. So I've been working on that for the past year and a half almost, and it is almost done and will be in bookstores in October. So the fun twist of this is that Beacon Press, the publisher, is a small independent house that has a really huge catalog, and they just firmed up a distribution deal with Random House. So now I'm a Random House author as well, which is pretty cool.
That is great.
Thank you.
How did you actually get hooked up with them, Jamar?
With Random House?
No, with Beacon.
Well, the real tale of the tape is it was a word of mouth thing. I had this email that kind of went across my desk from, a virtual water cooler. Some agent cartoonist who I know just passed out this forward, hey, you guys, anybody interested in this thing might be cool. And it was just, a bottle in the water from Beacon Press saying they were looking for somebody interested in doing an urban tale adaptation of a very important author. Check it out. If anybody's interested, get back with them. And, I kind of sat on it and went, well, that's cool, but, you can't keep shooting in the dark all the time. And, who's got the time and blah, blah, blah. I've got to wash my hair, so on and so forth. So I just kind of put it to the side.
It's funny you say that because I'm actually washing my hair while we talk. Hold on. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. Okay.
That's right. That's important. You must, and check behind your ears too. You always forget that. So I just put it to the side for a while, and I thought, that'd be cool. But as a lot of you aspiring people out there in radio land know that you can spend a lot of time just trying to find that next thing. Oh, let me enter this, or let me try this, or let me try out for this, and a lot of times you wind up just chasing your tail.
Right. Actually, that brings up a good point because one of the questions that I always get, I'm sure you guys do, is what are the best places to get work? Is it online? Is it by word of mouth? Do you have to know somebody?
When you find out, let me know.
Yeah, well, I mean, Jamar, it sounds like it's like many of us have dealt with, and I think a lot of people see more than they realize, is that there are chances out there to reach out and find things. But like you're saying, sometimes it's just a dead end, and then sometimes, you should be beating yourself up for not going after more stuff. So it's kind of a balancing act.
It is. It's a total balancing act. It's almost like, those old film clips of a guy spinning plates on little tiny sticks. It's kind of like that. And, you're always trying to make sure those plates don't fall. But, yeah, it's, you really do have to balance just, working on a portfolio and doing all of this into, also putting yourself out there and just taking chances on things and trying to, as you go along, you realize that, you do have an internal voice that says, yeah, dude, this isn't going to work out. Don't waste your time. Or, you know what, this might really be cool. Let me try that, and you kind of have to learn to tune in to that voice and know when it's, trying to ring true for yourself.
When you talk to them, did you...
My internal voice, or...?
Yeah, when you talk to your No, when you were speaking with the publisher,
mm-hmm.
Did you get a sense that this actually was something that would work out, or did you feel like it was another, wow, this might happen, might not, but...
Well, that's the power of the Internet is, when used for good, not evil, really, really, really crazy, because after... Oh, I skipped the part. Well, at first, when I heard from, my agents in the field, and it wasn't just to me, it was a blanket email to, a bunch of people on this person's list, try out, what do you guys think of this, try out for it, if not, whatever, it's whatever, do what you want with it, and I ignored it, and then maybe a week and a half later, I actually got an email from one of the editors at Beacon to me personally, saying, hey, Jamar, I don't know if you're interested in this, but the name keeps popping up, and, I'd love to extend an invite to you for this project. And she,
Oh, okay.
That's great.
Right. And I said, well, okay, the lightning's striking twice. I better pay attention to this now. And, at the bottom of the email was the same email that I got forwarded.
Oh.
You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, well, here, this is the information. What do you think?
Yeah, so basically, what happened was this was coming at you from two different sources, and it was pretty hard to ignore at that point.
Yeah, and
cool.
Really, how often does that happen? But so with that, wait a minute, I think I lost the question. What was the question, Rich? You were asking me a question.
Capital of Kansas.
Topeka.
That was good.
You know what? I don't remember what the question was because you answered it so thoroughly in a different way than I expected.
Oh, stop!
which is kind of a roundabout way of saying I have no brain right now.
So Jamar, how far along are you on this book right now?
I'm 99.8% done.
So it's a 4-page. It's like a 4-page story, and you've done like 3.5, or
hey,
in a year and a half.
Are we spilling trade secrets too?
How many pages is the graphic novel, first of all?
Well, the book is 144 pages.
And you're doing everything on that? The pencils, inks, colors, etc.?
Yes, and the adaptation.
Yeah, and is it actually a color book, or is it black and white?
It is a black and white, gray-toned book.
And you're doing all that work?
Yes, and the edits.
Wow.
So when you say the adaptation, you've read the book, and then you've had to sort of translate it into the comic form.
Yes.
So you weren't provided with the script. You actually had to create the script for yourself.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't handed any scripts or any nicely typed document.
Hey, John, that sounds like the way we work.
Yeah. But although there's no book to read from, so
yeah, exactly.
Jamar, that's really fascinating. I'm interested in hearing, because there's a couple times that's been done before. David Mazzucchelli did City of Glass. Raina Telgemeier did Babysitters Clubs.
Oh, right.
Where she basically read them, and then apparently she was a fan as a kid. But what was the process of sort of creating a graphic novel? And did you know how many pages it was going to be at the time?
No, well, there was a lot of back and forth with my editor at Beacon about how this was going to turn out. One of the first hurdles was that this is their first graphic project. So, it's brand new to them, and they're not exactly sure what they wanted at first. So it was kind of, my job to help figure it out. So the original book is 25 chapters. And, I had, when I put together my proposal for them, because I still had to dance. They did ask me, and I'm sure they asked other people, and then I had to put a proposal together for the project, and then, when I was done with that, myself and whoever else, these shadow people who they never told me about, also turned the proposals, and they gave them to Jeff Canada to look at, and he picked me. So, part of that whole process is they really wanted to turn the book into a graphic novel, but they didn't really know how that was going to happen. Notes, I tried to figure out, well, how am I going to make 25 chapters into this thing? Will be huge. You can take a 3-page piece of prose and make 7 pages of comics out of it, stretching it out for the emotion or just for the storytelling. Set everything up to say, okay, this is going to be 25 pages, and then after being realistic about it and talking over things with my editor, we chopped that down to 10. And it's still 144 pages.
Wow. It's kind of like, some of these huge novels.
Right.
Reading Stephen King is for like the 3rd or 4th time adapting his novel It, which just covers like 35 years in the lives of these people who are being terrorized, and they're turning it into a 120-minute movie.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? I mean, as a miniseries works really well, but when you've got a limited amount of pages for a graphic novel, that's got to be hard to figure out what to leave in and what to
right.
That kind of brings another question to mind: is how much leeway did you have about what to leave in and what to take out, if anything?
Totally running off of this ticking clock the whole time. When all of the ink was dried on this project, I think I said, "Hey guys, I got this gig, woohoo!" Maybe 2 years ago. It was a while ago. But things didn't really start coming together until like maybe a year ago, where we started talking about schedules and how realistically we're going to make this work. Really, how many pages is going to be, and realistically, Jamar, what can you do? Is this crazy? Tell us what we need to do, because we're not sure. What can you do?
Like one of the things where they came in and they're like, oh yeah, and now that we've signed the contract, we'll see the book in like 30 days?
Well, I think originally they were looking at it as a regular prose book, because that's just how they work. That's how book people work. They do what they do. And then, maybe they had to step back and go, okay, well, this is a new animal, and it's going to have to take longer, but we're just going to have growing pains, and maybe it'll just take as long as it's going to take. At a certain point, we had to start locking in lines with just production people and their mouths to feed and all that kind of stuff. So they said, listen, this this baby's coming in October, so what do we need to do to get it there?
So basically, like in my job outside of comics as an illustrator, part of my job is to educate the client as to what their needs actually are and how to accomplish that. And it sounds to me like that's kind of what you were dealing with
right.
the publisher then.
Sure. It's a very good relationship, and the things that we figured out in the long run didn't come out of a lot of hand wringing and frustration. It was just, okay, really, how are we going to do this? Because this was new to me too. I've done a lot of comic booky things and web comic-y things, but this is probably the biggest project I've ever taken on, and I had to be realistic with my time. And there's a lot of places where I thought 2 months would be a lot of time, and as we all know, 2 months goes by in a second.
Sure.
There's lots of tightening and loosening of deadlines that started to take shape.
I was just going to say, I'm on your website, jamarnicholas.blogspot.com right now, and I'm looking at the cover. Jeffrey Canada's Fist, Stick, Knife, Gun, Personal History of Violence. I mean, it looks really exciting, and it's available on Amazon already. And when does it hit the store shelves?
October 12th, and also I will be at the New York Comic-Con October 8th, 9th, and 10th, where I should be there at the Random House booth with advanced copies. So please come
Now, how many can I have of those? Like 12 or 13?
We'll work something out now.
Okay.
My birthday's that weekend, so I'm expecting to get a copy at least, right?
Yeah, man, with the red bow.
Oh, man, actually, that's what I was going to give Rich, and I figured it was cheap and free.
Ladies, there's enough of me to go around.
So that kind of gives us the lay of the land as far as what you've been up to and how you've accomplished it. So tell us what happened last night. What were you were in New York, right?
Okay, since this whole new relationship with Random House has happened, we had an appearance. Jeff Canada and I were slated to appear at the Random House office, and if you've ever been there, it's an amazing, magnificent structure of glass and steel with lots of books in between, in Midtown, where they had this thing called I think it was the first. Wait, how's that work? The first year you do something is inaugural. The second year is the first annual. Is that how that works?
First annual? No, I think the first annual is usually the first.
Well, no.
John, you're on that fancy internet right now. Why don't you go check?
Well, anyway, the Random House did an event last year, and they did another one this year. And it was this thing called Teachers Day, where they invited a lot of New York school teachers and students to come to the offices and hear presentations by Random House authors. So there were 3 other people there presenting, just talking to the crowd about what it takes to become an author, and what the process was and how their book came about, and just trying to inspire the students and also give the teachers some guidelines on how to incorporate their books into their classrooms, so on and so forth, like that. And Jeff and I were there. Jeff had a speech that he gave, and then I had a workshop to conduct with the same room. There were about 200 people there, and I gave a quick PowerPoint workshop on creating your own stories and words and pictures. So I went over a little bit of the history of a graphic novel and how that works in the real world. Not everybody needs to know about mouse and all that stuff. They just want to know, why should I look at these pictures and read the words at the same time? Because, people get confused with that stuff.
And what was the demographics? I mean, was it was educators, or were there, I take it there were no people with pointy ears in blue Star Trek uniforms?
No. Yeah, there are no Trekkies in attendance. These were all professional people. They're all high school educators, or educators of some fashion from New York. A lot of suits were there. A lot of the Random House staff, and students who were invited by their teachers.
Oh, there were students.
Yeah, there were students there. They're all high school kids or middle school kids.
To hear their reaction once you were doing the presentation.
Well, they're into it, but high school kids are. They're just kind of like, But, at the end, they were really into it. And, also, I'm sure most of the students that were there because they're the good kids in their school,
right,
who would be into coming to something like that.
That's right. Well, you don't want to bring the bad kids into downtown New York, or never see them again.
Because, those are the ones that steal the apple from the bottom of the pile, and then they all roll into the street.
Exactly. The young ruffians.
You can tell John is not from New York.
No good nicks. Hey, you hooligan, come back here with my melon.
He's after us again.
I'm afraid that John's going to start singing "When You're a Jet" in a minute.
You know what? Honestly, it has been on the tip of my tongue before. Quite literally, I was like, so you were like, what happened in New York? And I'm thinking like,
snapping. I do thing.
I imagine John with a pack of Lucky Strikes rolled up in his shirt sleeve.
I did have an unhealthy obsession with the Fonz when I was a kid.
Didn't we all, John?
What do you mean you did?
Hey.
So, I presented, and then there was a Q&A. There was a Q&A with all the authors, but we came on last. And it looked like all those other guys kind of got out of there, because by the end of the day, we were the only people, there and presenting. So we had the whole floor to ourselves.
Oh, very cool.
And, there were some really cool statements from a lot of people in the audience, not even questions.
What's an example of something someone said?
Teachers stood up and said, you know what, Mr. Nicholas, and that's still something I'm dealing with being called these days.
That's what happens when you get old.
Well, like teachers said things such as, you know what, Jamar, you had said something about when you were a kid, your teachers used to take your comic books from you, and it's really interesting to hear how these graphic novel things that are coming up can be used as teaching tools, and we have reluctant readers, and it's a very accessible thing, and I can't wait to take this back to my classroom. Thank you so much.
Oh, that's great.
And, things like that. And it was kind of eye-opening because, now I'm dealing with a new audience, and, I think us in comic land, really desensitized into what, the real world is and how people react to things. And who still don't get this stuff. There are plenty of people who said, I don't know, I keep hearing this graphic novel thing. What's that about? Or even a friend of ours who came, who's a teacher, was reading somebody else's graphic novel that they had on the freebie tape at the back, and she blew through it in like the session. She was like, "Oh, I'm on page 60 already." She was just breezing through it. And I asked her, "Well, how'd you read it so fast?" She was like, "I'm just reading the words." She wasn't really looking at the pictures because that's normally that's not how people read things. If you don't read comic books, you don't process graphic novels that easy. It's just like, handing somebody a comic book and going, "Oh, this is really cool," and they don't get it because they don't know the language of reading them.
Yeah, I mean, my wife Beth is always, she's my toughest audience and my best audience because whenever I do a comic, I will always, it's my immaturity really that kicks in. I walk like, look what I did, just like I did when I was 5 and my mom had put it up on the refrigerator. Well, now my wife will look at it and she's like, yeah.
And she'll throw it in the oven.
Yeah. She's like, if she can't get it, then I know that I'm not writing. And to our listeners out there, I should point out that the thing about the work that Jamar and Rich and I and some of the people we're going to be interviewing over the next couple of weeks have in common is that we're doing comic work that we really are trying to aim for the other 99% of readers out there that maybe don't walk into a comic shop. And it's funny because at first it was a very conscious effort. Now that audience, like in this case, is seeking us out. And Jamar, you're a great case of that, where people were looking for someone. They weren't looking for the guy who draws Batman. They were looking for the guy who draws Detective Boogaloo. And,
right.
There's like what you just said in the last 5 minutes. The two of you actually, there are like 3 or 4 different topics in there that I would love to go over. And just to kind of lay some of that out there, one of them is educating people that are non-comics readers to the actual logistics of how you read a comic book or a graphic novel is one thing that's on my mind. Another,
write that down, John.
Yeah, take notes.
Yes, I would say, why don't you pick one and we'll run with that one.
Well, let me just I'll throw the others out there that occurred to me. Another one that Jamar and I had actually spoken about this afternoon. He and I spoke on the phone, and we were talking.
Hold on. You're talking to each other without me on the line?
Yeah. Well,
baby, it's not like that. Listen.
Rich, you know what? I am now not giving you that free copy of Jamar's new book.
You know what? I totally feel like the straight man here. So anyway, the other thing that was on my mind about that is it's really interesting how we as an industry, and I mean comics as an industry, seems so insecure about itself and doesn't really. It's almost like we don't know how to promote ourselves outside of the insular nature of the industry itself. Whereas book publishing is a completely different animal.
Right.
They wind up. There's a lot more respect, I believe, within the industry itself for the people that are doing the work. At least from the few people I've spoken with in the publishing industry that are doing graphic novels, as opposed to, like for instance, Jimmy Gownley, our buddy who does Amelia Rules. He is getting a ton of recognition for what he does through Simon & Schuster now, and he's been self-publishing for years under his own imprints, and now all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but now he's starting to really get some recognition as an author and not just a comic book artist, so to speak.
Right.
So maybe that's a good way to go in the next session, the next section, I should say, of the show.
Yeah, well, that is a good point, and again, reaching out to the people who maybe are aspiring creators I often am asked where are the best places to show your work or best places to reach out to audiences. And, the thing...
Highway rest stops.
Well, yeah, highway rest. Very good. Well, I had a creator, Mark Wheatley, one time, who has done a lot of different books.
No real names, John. No real names.
Well, Mark actually said, he's like, it's very frustrating because I do these books, I work so hard, and I could literally go out on the street in Baltimore, near where he lives, and I could probably sell more comics in a day on the street than I can through every comic shop in America.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is because getting the word out is so hard, the distribution, and quite frankly, you just don't have the people coming in. And so what I was going to say, and this sort of ties in with, what are the best ways to reach the real people out there with comics and cartoons, and how is that going to change comics in the future? My own personal viewpoint on it is that really the future of comics and cartooning in general is that the next great, the next Charles Schultz or the next, Art Spiegelman is already on the web. And I think a lot of, internet marketing as well as just internet content, to me, is the way that these things are going. I still think print is very, very important.
I think you have a great point there. My caveat to all of that is that it's not just about putting stuff on the web. I mean, you're talking about print also. I think, in my mind, and you and I, of course, have spoken about this with Roboy Red, I really think that the web is the preeminent place to put your work out there where you can get the broadest audience that's available to you, and you bring them in, you give them a product at regular intervals, and at some point, hopefully they'll become so in tune with what you're doing that they want to see more of it, and they also want to own the stuff that you have, which kind of supports the print medium where you print for that audience that's already built in. And I think Scott Kurtz is a great example of that, doing PvP online. I mean, basically everything he does is online, and then he prints the books out to support that, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah, and there's also, he's part of a group, and should really say that I don't know if this podcast would exist if it hadn't been the podcast of the Web Comics Weekly guys, sort of inspiring us, myself particularly, to reach out to audiences out there that are looking for information. And Brad Geigar does a book called Evil Inc. I think it's evil-inc.com, and he's been making a living essentially doing comics on the web, then collecting them. And I think he puts out maybe a book a year. I know some of the other people do 2 books a year, and it's a significant amount of people and significant amount of income for these guys.
Well, and I also think John's probably going to be too humble to point this out, but you were actually a webcomic pioneer. I mean, you were one of the first people to actually put a comic with Buzzboy on the web. I think you, Steve Conley, and maybe 1 or 2 other people at the time that was just starting out, right?
Yeah, well, there were a couple. Argon Zark was the earliest.
Charlie Parker.
Exactly, and Charlie was doing that, and my friend Steve Conley, who I think everyone here knows, he was getting ready to do a web comic, and we were doing a comic signing back in, it was December of '99. He said, January 1st, I'm launching a web comic. I was like, what, a web comic? And
right.
And he was just talking about it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to put it out 5 days a week. It'll be like 3 or 4 panels, just like a newspaper strip. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so it was December 31st, and I had not even drawn my first strip. And basically, every morning for 6 months, I would get up, draw my strip, pencil, ink it, letter it, and color it, all within like a 2 or 3 hour period. And it was basically just an exercise in doing it as fast as I could, having no idea what I was going to draw, and put out a web strip for a year. But what my mistake was is essentially it was just a matter of timing. I left too early. At the time, Steve and Marty Bowman, who was doing Creator Kid, we could not figure out a way to make money doing this because the people who were reading the comics did not want to buy comics in print. And the people who were reading comics in print were not going to the web at that time.
Right.
So
wow, it's like an alien world you're talking about when you look at today's web.
My primitive mind.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, that's because I think what we're all talking about here is that everything is on the web at this point. I mean, if you're not putting comics on the web, you're doing something wrong at this point, right?
Yeah, you've done it for a while.
Yeah, I've done it for a while, and I've been going through a little bit of creative frustration just because, John, and we could speak to this a little bit because when I first met you, we've known each other for almost, or maybe a little bit over 10 years.
Yeah, yep.
And you were doing, early web stuff, and, people didn't know what to do with it. And, when I started in, was it 97 or something, self-publishing, and also I had an early web comic. I was doing the Jamar Chronicles, my first self-published work.
That's
online.
Right. It was on the web, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Jamar Chronicles Weekly.
Yeah.
And I believe I was Friday on this one early web comics portal. What was it? Comics2go.com or something like that.
That's a pretty good name.
Yeah, right. I might have to buy that back. And I was doing this, and there was no audience, or if there was an audience, there was no way to keep them or catch them or, shake them down for money. Because it was a novelty. It's like, oh, that's cool, it's a comic. Or, well, I guess I'll come back and read it next week. And, no one was thinking about, well, let me make a print collection of this. Or, or even doing advertising.
At the time, was everybody thinking of it all as mutually exclusive? I mean, were you guys finding that if you were doing, and I guess you kind of addressed this, John, but to some degree, were you finding that if you had BuzzBoy Online, for instance, did it not occur to you to do it as a comic book too, or was that just a separate plan?
Well, I was working on comics as well, but I would say that my time doing web comics was so enriching from a creative stance because I realized every day was somebody's first strip, and I had to depict the characters in a way that people could understand what their personalities were. So Doc Cyber, who's next mad scientist that gave up being evil to become a baker, I started having him talk in food metaphors, like, oh, we're in quite a pickle this time, and wah, wah, and there were a lot of things like that, and but I really think it was an immaturity on my point, or on my level, because I would put out a strip, and I would get 3 or 4 emails within 5 minutes of people responding to that strip. Now, when's the last time anyone's put out a comic and they got a reaction in 5 days if it wasn't something that was reviewed online and it was Superman?
Right.
So I would have people basically say, like, I love today's strip. Someone came in one day, they're like, it seems like you haven't done anything for a while. Like, have the characters do something more exciting, or they would give a suggestion. And I think that vibrancy, because we were only on dial-up, I didn't equate it with success. I didn't see that I was actually reaching more people probably than I was with my print.
And directly also.
Yeah, and Jamar and Rich, there's one other thing, and you brought it up, Jamar. I mean, we were doing web strips, and then we would do comics. And you were smart because you were doing your web comic and then converting it into a comic book. But what didn't really exist at that point in 1997 and 98 were graphic novels as something that was going into bookstores and going into different things. The first BuzzBoy graphic novel came out in 2001, and I still deal with it. It's mainly for kids, but I still deal with the fact that librarians listed it as a young adult book because there were no graphic novels for kids. If they had a comic section, a kid would walk up and be picking up an Archie, and then suddenly he's reading Dark Knight. So, I mean, now that's all changed.
Yeah. It's almost like they say, it's a whole new world, just like those Disney people say. I knew one of you guys was going to start singing.
Oh, you're not going to get me singing here.
You did that on purpose, didn't you? You're just like...
I just set it up. I set the ball up. Somebody's got to spike it.
Right.
Feeding lines to John so he can come up with songs.
Well,
be the Joe Buck of the podcast.
We should talk that, another thing related to is, Jamar and Rich, when I grew up reading comics, I really had no one else in my hometown that was reading or drawing comics. And it wasn't until I was creating BuzzBoy that I actually started to show my comics to people at shows and things like that. And I was wondering, like Jamar, you and I met at SPX. That was my first.
Right.
That was like my third show I ever did.
Memories.
Yeah, and Rich, you and I met at the Acme show, which was a small press show up in Delaware that Joe Murray from Captain Blue Hen ran.
Yep.
You know, if you had to give advice to someone who is trying to reach out besides the web, what would be a good show to go to these days?
You ask Jamar.
Ask Rich first.
Hi, John. Well, John, I said maybe. Well, I will say that SPX was a great show for me because there were a lot of people that were really looking for something different, and although at the same time you got people that were angry that I was doing a funny superhero book, and people did not see why I should be there. And I'm sure it was going to pop up sooner or later, but I did not give Jamar a very good impression of myself.
I'm a jerk, John.
And because I was all out from work, I actually lived very close to where the SPX in Bethesda, Maryland was put on, and Jamar came up to me, and I immediately called him Jamal, and then was very friendly.
You only stopped calling him Jamal last year, though.
Exactly.
That's a deal breaker.
That's right, Rick. So anyway, someone came up to me at that show and actually yelled at me for having a superhero book at SPX, and
I believe you.
At the same time, that was also one of the best shows.
Wasn't SPX really about independent publishing, though, as opposed to the actual subject matter?
Yeah, well, said, you don't belong here, you're not independent, you do a superhero book, and I said, check out my Diamond Numbers, I'm more independent than Fantagraphics.
Yeah. The reason I asked that is because, of course, my background is that I'm coming from the mainstream world of having done 10 years doing DC and Marvel comics, and then my first foray into any independent comics whatsoever was when you and I met, John and I met at the Acme show. That was in 2002, and I really haven't done more than one or two mainstream gigs since then. It's been mostly indie stuff, so it's kind of weird because I kind of bridge both worlds, and I really feel more, I guess I feel more part of the indie world at this point because I'm certainly not pursuing stuff with mainstream. I mean, my stuff outside of our self-publishing stuff is illustration, so...
So I'm trying to think of a good comparison. It's like you were Tom Cruise in the movies, and then like
next, you see me jump on a couch? Wow.
Now you're the center square on Hollywood Squares. You're on television.
I'm square, all right.
But yeah, well, I think I remember, especially back in the early SPX days, and just to clarify for people who don't live in the East Coast, the SPX is the acronym for the Small Press Expo, and I think the site's still the same. It's spxpo.com.
Yeah, SPXPO.
SPXPO or something. So many P's.
What we'll wind up doing for those listening is we will probably compile a list of the websites we do mention.
I'm not doing that.
I'm not doing that at all.
No way. Is it this year? The SPX is September 11th and 12th. In Bethesda, Maryland.
And I believe they're probably sold out because it's a hot ticket.
Well, the tables are sold out. I mean, I would suggest that anyone who's thinking about publishing should go and talk to the people there because, some of these people, it's become a lot more of a show where people are creating mini comics and doing micro printing,
is that printing really small? Is that what that means?
Yeah, print on demand.
Printing on matchbooks.
Matchbooks. That's a whole new art form.
Jimmy Downey and Harold Buckles actually did that with Amelia.
Yeah, he created, I can't remember what matchlessbooks.com, I think was his thing. It was taking books that basically little mini comics.
They're very cool, actually.
They look like little matchbooks, but the problem is that not many people, smoke cigarettes anymore, so you don't see matchbooks around.
I thought you were going to say they lose them.
So well, I'm sure that's an issue too. But I think the real problem is that the people just don't know what they are. The frame of reference for a matchbook is getting smaller and smaller at this point.
Right.
Which is a good thing because it means less people smoking.
I guess the next step is like a digital webcomic on a lighter.
Yeah, that's fun.
I just thought of that. I'm going to give that one to you guys for free.
How about instead you just do it on a flash drive? That would be a little bit more up to date, I think.
That's not a bad idea. Don't give that away.
No, we'll edit that one out. But going back to your original question, John.
Right.
you were asking what we think are the best places for aspiring cartoonists, I suppose.
Yeah, if you're going to set up your first, you put together a comic, where's a good place to go and set up and try to, let people know about it? I mean, we said obviously the web is a great place to promote your stuff, and it doesn't really cost you much. But yeah, what are some good shows that you two have attended, whether it was at the beginning of your career or just recently?
Well, in my experience, the better shows for that sort of thing just happen to be two of my favorite shows, and one is the what we mentioned before, the Baltimore Comic-Con. It's a very friendly show, and people are really willing to pick up stuff that they haven't necessarily seen before. And they really come around to all the tables, and they check out all the artists and all the writers and what they're doing, and they're very interested. And Heroes Con in Charlotte, North Carolina, which we just attended, John and I did a couple of weeks ago, is another one. Very similar atmosphere. I've also heard that Emerald City Comic-Con on the West Coast, I think it's is that in Seattle? It must be Seattle, right? That's Emerald City.
Yep.
And that's supposed to be in line. Those three shows are sort of the triumvirate of creator happy shows. Like the creators tend to really love doing those shows. Yeah. And
yeah, I've never done Emerald City. That sounds like just a great show.
I would love to do it sometime. I mean, that's a show that I've spoken with the promoter about, and the only thing that's keeping me from it is that it's so far away from where I am, and just getting stuff to it and the shipping and everything would be probably prohibitive. But it would be a fun show to do and cruise around in, I think.
Well, you mean like for like chicks and stuff, or what do you get? You
really are obsessed with the Fonz, aren't you?
I was just thinking.
Chicks?
I just pictured it, me wearing a leather jacket walking around. It makes a lot of sense. I think I'm going to definitely do that show next year.
The sad thing about this, Jamar, is that we both know that John's really Richie Cunningham, not the Fonz.
I thought he was Potsy.
Nice. Just don't call me Mouth.
That's right. I'll give you some.
Still got it.
Well, I have a list.
Yeah.
I have a list, real quick. Now, we already spoke about...
Are we on your list?
No, you're number one with a bullet, John Gallagher.
A literal bullet.
A literal bullet. SPX, because that's my home, even though I haven't been home in some time. I had such great memories of doing the early SPX shows, and things have grown, and it's in a new venue, and now everybody's jeans are really skinny, and people wear white belts, and it's not really my world anymore, and that's cool. I'm getting older. I can deal with that. But, still for an aspiring comics creator who wants to,
wear a white belt.
Wear a white belt and keep it DIY, Some of all of these new schools that are coming out, like, the place out in Vermont, the
Cartoon Studies.
Yeah, that place.
James Center for
what?
Cartoon Studies.
Yeah, James Sturm School, and even Savannah College of Art and Design, and these places where these kids are now getting taught how to do comics. And I want to think of that as competition, but hey, it's all love. Come do your comics.
Now, I started off at the School of Visual Arts, where one of the actual majors was cartooning, and that was my major, and a lot of people that were in my class went on to actually become comic book artists, so they must have been doing something right. And then this is the Kubert School too in New Jersey.
Well, here's an interesting spin, and since we talked about conventions, I don't feel bad for switching the subject. Rich, what I think is interesting about SVA and Kubert is that I feel like the focus, especially back then, was to get you a job at DC or Marvel.
Oh, yeah, well, at the time, that's when I was going. I mean, now we're talking 100 years ago, but it was definitely. I mean, the appeal to being any sort of major at SVA was that you were taught by working artists. So when I was an illustration major, which I was my first 2 years, I was actually taught by world-class and world-famous illustrators. I mean, there were a ton of them, but they were just amazing artists. And then when I switched over to cartooning, I mean, the teachers that were there, I didn't have them as a teacher, but Walt Simonson was one, Gene Cohen, Will...
Never heard of any of these people.
Will Eisner, you may have heard of him.
Nope. He used to run Disney.
Yeah. He made the Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
But my teachers, the teachers that I knew, were Klaus Janson, who I'm still friends with and I still consider a mentor to this day, Joe Orlando, the late, great Joe Orlando, Carmine Infantino, Sal Amendola. These are all old-school Marvel and DC guys. And if I'm reading what your question is correctly, yes, what they knew was the mainstream DC Marvel comics, and that's what they tried to kind of push people into. And the people that didn't fit in those boxes were the ones who really didn't go into the industry, or they went into the industry doing their own thing, like John or you, where you did your own projects. And people didn't hear about them for another 5-10 years after that. Right. So there are guys out there and girls out there who I went to school with who, we always wondered, well, what happened to them? And then, 5 years later, we find they've been very successful doing stuff independently for years.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, speaking of independent, Jamar, what's one other show that you think would be good for that aspiring creator?
MoCA.
MoCA, okay.
MoCA is a long acronym. Museum of Cartoon and Comic Art.
Oh, that's good. That's why I said okay, because I was like, okay, someone else tell me what that is.
I knew. It took me a second.
So MoCA is kind of like that's San Francisco, right?
Oh yeah, the Alternative Press Expo.
Exactly. That's a lot like
SPA. It's like the West Coast SPA. Exactly. And MoCA has its own flavor, but that is based in the middle of the Village in New York City. It was usually around this time, isn't it? Or was it a couple, maybe in June?
I'm not sure.
It was a couple, I think it was about a month and a half ago. I remember Baltimore Comic-Con is August 28th and 29th this year. They used to always be September 11th, and now SPX is there. I think the big thing is the New York Comic-Con has really sort of mixed things up on the East Coast. And,
right.
It's turned a lot of heads. Definitely has changed.
Exactly. Now, I will say that Wizard World Chicago, which is now, I believe, called the Chicago Comic-Con, that the fans in Chicago just seem to be about the nicest people in the world. And back in '98, I did Wizard World Chicago, and then it was a couple years later before I even came back, and people are like, I remember you. I bought your comics. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that was 1 and 2. I don't have 3 and 4, just the collection. And they're like, oh, I'll buy the collection. So I will say that, as far as
good marketing,
people trying new stuff, I was like, oh, sad sack. So, things that we can talk about in the future probably would be, schooling, the different events that are good for different reasons for us. And, just to wrap things up, I'm going to be appearing at San Diego Comic-Con July 21st through the 25th. Wasn't planning on that, but things have changed. I'll be at a booth called the Don't Eat Any Bugs Productions booth. And also, the three of us will be at the Baltimore Comic-Con August 28th and 29th at the Kids Love Comics booth, which is a kid-friendly, all-ages booth. We do have all our material there, but we will be running some little training sessions for young people, as well as, telling kids about how we created comics and even showing them how they can create their own and going through all the steps and even talking a little bit about the history, which is some of the things all three of us have spoken at schools, and that's something we like to do. So those are my next two events, and I plan to have announcements real soon about the next Buzzboy graphic novel.
Nice.
Yes, thank you.
I can't wait to hear it.
Do I have time for my appearance schedule?
Definitely.
It's
all the time we have, folks. Yeah, we definitely have time. Take as long as you want.
That was awesome. Oh, we're out of time. Well, look at that. Sorry about that.
That'll have to be the theme of the show. Is like we always end with Rich going, and let me just tell you, and then we cut off like, Rich.
I will be appearing in my underwear in my studio all summer long.
Fantastic.
And we're done.
And that'll be it. That's right. No, but I will be at the same things that John just said I will be at, and if anything else comes up, we'll cover it in another podcast.
Okay, Rich, what's your schedule look like this summer and into the fall?
As you mentioned, I will be at Baltimore Comic-Con in August. I am also planning on attending the New York Comic-Con in October. Of course, anytime I walk by Jamar's table, I do a lot of lifting.
Really? Oh, wow. You know, someday we'll share some stories about some of the lifting I've done at conventions for people. And
you guys do bring a actual diner booth into the comic book show.
We have in the past. That's really up to John, because that's an interesting aspect that people may not know about John, is that he works at an actual diner booth, which he stole from a diner, I understand.
Exactly. Well, you know what? Next time I'll actually start off the show talking about why we call this show the Comic Book Diner, and I'm going to just leave that as sort of a myth.
Ooh, the origin story. I like that.
Secret origin of John Gallagher and his diner booth.
Exactly.
His magical diner booth.
Well, and you know, thanks to our friends at the Baltimore Comic-Con. This show's brought to you by them because of their support with the Kids Love Comics group that we're all part of, and every year they are nice enough to give us some space to reach out to young people. And it's a really family-friendly show, like Charlotte, and I'm sure many of the other shows around there. So I'm John Gallagher. My websites are buzzboy.com, skydogcomics.com, and with Rich, roboyred.com. You can reach us through our websites, and if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer about creating comics, print versus web, and even talking about the spooky iPads and iPhone comics that are out there, we can go forward with that as well. Jamar is at jamarnicholas.com, and Rich is at richfaber.com. Is that right, Rich?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Just my name.
You know, I just have to mention that you have jamarnicholas.com, Rich, you have richfaber.com. Who's been working on websites since like 1993, finally in like 2001 decided to get johngallagher.com and found out, and people may or may not know that I'm from central Pennsylvania originally. I found out that there is a mobile DJ who does weddings and bar mitzvahs who owns johngallagher.com.
Wait a minute, that's not you?
And I am positive that all my alumni from Selinsgrove Area High School class of 1986 think that
Go Fighting Badgers.
Yeah. We were actually the Selinsgrove Seals.
I'm so sad because I really thought you were going to do my kid's bar mitzvah, John.
I apologize. I'm going to call family services on you before that ever. So anyway, do not go to johngallagher.com unless you want to get the best of the 80s, 90s, and songs you and Boston agree on. I'm John Gallagher, and for Jamar Nicholas and Rich Faber, I bid you adieu. Fake Diner sounds right here. Oh, I think I'll have this cheeseburger.
Thanks for stopping by, guys.